video for you on how to produce a management landscape plan, which is essential points for your assignments. Okay, so the process, guys, is remarkably straightforward. It simply involves asking a few questions. Okay, the only problem is generally asking the same question of a landscape or a garden. And as you're asking these questions, you're going to be both the interrogator and the respondent.
So the next stage we come on to then is that of inventory. Now inventory just simply means getting out onto the site, seeing what's there, making lists of things if you like, and it might involve measuring out, looking how much of something you've got. For your case, for this particular assignment, that isn't the essential thing. So we'll just come into an area like this and taking a look what's here and making sure you counted everything. So inventory, knowing what you've got.
So documentation. This can be done by using a desktop survey or using existing plans. Okay, and we will have a plan on Moodle for you to have a look at for your site, for your garden report. What you also need to know is you actually need to visit the garden as well and note that things change with time. So the garden perhaps you might have seen in the spring might be very different to the one you see in the autumn.
Another important constraint that you need to consider in making a management plan is the seasonality. You're visiting just at a certain time of the year. What's it like at other times of the year? Okay, so we're in a glass house here, so we know that it's going to be hot in the summer, it's going to be cooler in the winter. We know some things flower at particular times of the year, other things are looking less good. And seasonality is really important, especially outside, because it can dictate what the ground conditions are or what the growing conditions are for the plants.
Analysing the site, and a really good idea is to work from the bottom up. So look at the soil. What's the soil like? We have extra information on Moodle for you about the soil, but looking concerning the pH and things. So start from the soil, working up through your lower range of shrubs and up through your tree level and things like this. So you need to look at the vegetation and work out what impact it has on the other plants around it. And then you're going to make a list of the characteristics. And this really will start from perhaps the herbaceous perennials up through the shrub layer, then into the trees.
Now the next thing you need to do is a general appraisal of everything. Now an appraisal is where you sort of really have a look at things and you look at the general condition of them and you start to think, what needs to be done here? So looking at these you might think, are there any leaves which are yellowed? Anything which is not looking too good? Distorted leaves? Anything need pruning? Yellow leaves, pruning, all this sort of thing. That's the sort of thing you consider. And what you do is you make recommendations, which we call a prescription. So it's a prescribed action which needs to happen in order to bring the level of the standard of maintenance up to where you want it. And it's really important that you think about this carefully because prescribed landscape maintenance is how you achieve a standard. You can't just say you've got to keep it to a good standard. You have to maybe say all the yellow leaves to be removed. Dust to be removed from leaf surfaces in a case like this, pruning to take place in a particular way. And it's really important that you're specific because unless you are, people will do what they think is needed. And if you're the landscape manager, you need to make the recommendations. The next key stage then is aims and objectives. Now aims are where you're really hoping to take it. So if you want a really good standard of maintenance, you will set your aims as to how, where you're going to be when you get there. Your objectives are the things you will do along the way to make it look good. So your aim might be to have a really nicely pruned shrub. Your objective will be to prune it correctly at the correct time of the year so subsequent growth patterns give you the desired shape of the shrub. Okay? So they sometimes merge, especially over time. Now, from your point of view, aims and objectives are going to be a little bit more of a backdrop. You have to think strategically, so you have to be thinking, what do I think this site needs to achieve? But at the same time, you have to really then come up with your prescriptive actions, which will take it along the way there. So for all this sort of vegetation here, you would decide, does this need pruning this year, or next year, or once every 3 years? And once you set these objectives, your aims should hopefully be achieved. So don't get too caught up in the long-term things. Make sure you work out what they are, but then work out the shorter-term objectives for the next year.
Now, linking to your assignment, but we're going to use this amenity glasshouse for our example, we're going to look at the history section. Now, this glasshouse has been here for about 25 years, which actually is a Venlo type of glasshouse, which was originally used for growing crops in, but we've turned it into an amenity glasshouse, more for tropical plants. And this has been permanently planted for the last 20 years, giving students a really good example of semi-hardy plants and an environment, plus with a wonderful feature of the pond as well. So really a bit of a taste of exotic within Essex.
Next question then, on your list, what's the site for? Well, you could say the site is for growing tropical plants in. Actually, the site is here for a number of reasons. It's a really good selling point for horticulture when people visit the university. They take one look at it and they think, this is nice. It's great for when we have schools visiting, and it's really good for doing practicals when it comes down to, say, for instance, pruning tropical or subtropical plants that we couldn't otherwise do. So I think rather than say it's for growing plants in, it isn't. You've got to think about exactly what the use is, and the use is education and promotion of courses at Little University College.
So our next question is, who uses the site? And this site, this glasshouse, is really multi-use. So initially it's education for all students, both FE and HE students, but it's much wider than that. We use it for a wider curriculum. We've had students for art and design using this. We've even been used for fashion shoots. Plus, as Mick said in the earlier point, that it is used for promotion as well. So it has a very wide usage and a very important and a fabulous facility that we have here at the University College.
So next, what are the opportunities and constraints? Well, the opportunities in this area are always that maybe we could put some new things in. There's always something showy, particularly this time of the year. We may think, it's maybe not looking as flowery best, let's look for something that flowers in the winter. Or it could just be that we say, the budget for heating this is not really worth it, so we'll have to come up with some plants which are cold tolerant, but will need to be kept frost free. So what you've got to remember is constraints and opportunities work hand in hand. What we're really saying is, if there is a difficulty, how do we overcome it? Because the way we overcome it is an opportunity to get the site looking tip-top. And that's what it's about in landscaping. It's not about thinking, oh, we can't do this or we can't do that. It's really about saying, okay, if we set our objectives and what we want from this, how do we achieve it given the constraints we've got? What opportunities does that leave us remaining?
So your next section is identifying maintenance. So for example, within the glasshouse, we can see where we've cut down shrubs, which has allowed more light in. Then we began to have more annuals coming through. So hence we're going to need to do some weeding here. And perhaps a way to reduce the weeds might be using a mulch over the top of the surface. And then if I look just down to the base of the path here, you can see that weeds are germinating here as well. So we always need to include what we call the hard landscape features as well, because they need a certain amount of maintenance as well. Other things looking around here, we can see the climbers are obviously outgrowing the space, so there's pruning. But as we look up here to this lovely jasmine, which is going to be out of shot, we'll look around, we don't want to prune it too early because we'll be cutting out the flowers. So you always need to think about when the season of interest is and how this fits in with our maintenance demands.
Now, the upshot of much of this is that you have to ultimately make constructive comments. Now, I've deliberately stood in front of this tree here because the pruning that's gone on here has been a little bit, should we say, raw, but it actually hasn't really done anything to enhance the overall shape of the tree. Now, I could stand here and say, this is awful, or make all sorts of comments, but it would be more helpful to then say what needed to be done. So rather than criticise, a constructive comment would be that maybe some remedial pruning needs to be done on this, but maybe the people who did the pruning would need to be better briefed next time it was pruned as to what the objectives of the pruning were. So it's not about going around and finding fault. You will find fault, but constructive comments are just that. They're a way that you find to say, how are we going to put this right? Just going around and saying that something is wrong is not good enough if you are the manager of the site.
Okay, the final section is where do you get hold of that additional information to help you support the write-up of your garden report. And if you look at your Moodle page for this module, you'll see very extensive information on sort of support, and also with your books and periodicals are listed in the module specification guide, and this will greatly help you. And the other thing we can recommend is perhaps if you have the opportunity to go and visit other gardens which have a similarity to your area you're doing a report on. So perhaps, you know, a like for like. And then you can actually sort of say that you've seen other gardens and that you can compare them to the garden you're writing a report. This gives a very good overall view. So hopefully this short video clip will really help you sort of setting up your assignment and using this step-by-step process to help you with the write-up.
And don't worry if you're thinking, I thought they were going to show us something on the site. You've got to bring what you found out to a site. So we're not going to tell you how to do that particular assignment. We're going to tell you how to do the process, and that was the idea today. So think about what was said in here and just extrapolate that into the area that you're working within. So it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.